Hello everyone, Jamie here. I've made this tutorial to be a basic introduction to Ableton. Hopefully just cover some of the very fundamentals of what it does, what it is. I'll try not to drift off. So I was conscious on the first meeting we had, some of the people who attended were beginners and hadn't seen Ableton before, and it was a bit difficult to fully show everybody because people were sat behind me. Couldn't see the screen clearly, couldn't see what I was doing. So I'm going to try and cover some of those things again today and hopefully show you, and you can see, follow my mouse and hopefully appreciate a bit more what I'm trying to show you and teach you. So Ableton is a piece of software known as a DAW, Digital Audio Workstation, and essentially it's a very advanced piece of software that you can use to create all kinds of music. It's not specific to any genre. You can make techno, you can make heavy rock, you can make blues. If you can make sound, Ableton can record it and sequence it and turn it into a track. It handles on the main MIDI and audio. So MIDI stands for Musical Integrated Digital Interface. And it's essentially, I like to think it as the language and the methodology that synthesizers, drum machines, effects racks, sequencers all talk to each other. And you normally think of hardware as being these devices, but they can also, of course, be software, also referred to as plugins or VSTs. That's a very common name you'll hear for them. VST stands for Virtual Studio Technology. They're just different names that people use for additional plugins that come with Ableton, and it's all software. So I'm going to go to the tracks, click on track 1, and you'll see at the bottom, whenever I click a track, the bottom will change. So if I click on MIDI, the first track, you'll notice I've got 2 devices already there. These are default devices that I load every time. So this is a default template that loads every time I start Ableton. It's an EQ plugin and a utility plugin. And just very quickly, the EQ stands for equalizer, and it allows you to alter your sound. You can cut the low frequencies, you can boost the high frequencies, and everything in between. And essentially that just allows you to sculpt your sound a bit more. Not going to go into all the settings, I'll keep it basic. The next device is a utility, and it's basically the end of your chain. It's how you want some basic settings to be set for that particular sound, so that you can change it, the stereo, whether it's left or right, whether it's mono, the stereo width of the sound, the panning, and also the gain. It's a really useful device, very underrated device. But as I say, that's just default. I load them on every track, so every time I start Ableton, this is how my track appears. So just moving across from my tracks within Ableton, I'm coming to the navigation panes, and the main one is the one furthest on the left. Every time you click that, the sub menu next to it will change accordingly. What I'm going to focus on today for the MIDI is looking at instruments and plugins and what the difference is. For Ableton, it's just terminology. So if I click on instruments, you'll see a full list of all different instruments: drum rack, drum sampler, and synthesizers like Meld and Operator. Anything that's in the instruments folder in Ableton means it's come with Ableton. Ableton have packaged these bits and bobs, put them all together, and it's depending on which package you've got, whether it's the basic live intro or whether it's live standard or live suite, depends on how many of these devices appear. I've actually got Ableton Suite. I've managed to save up for it over the years, and I've got everything that comes with Ableton Suite. So everything that's in here is everything that's packaged by Ableton. Now if I switch to plugins, it's essentially the same thing but third party. So anything you've paid extra money for to a third party and bought, for example here you can see that Diva's open, and that's from a company called UE, however you say that, I'm not sure, but that one's called Diva, and that's a MIDI instrument, that's a synthesizer. It's essentially the same as any synthesizer, but it's a software version. So while I've on MIDI track 1, I'll just drag and drop where it says drop instrument here on track 1, and let go, and it opens up Diva. And as I said, it's a fully functioning synthesizer. It's very powerful. You can achieve an awful lot with it. It's recreating a load of different modeling synthesizers. There's loads of different settings, so you can change it. It can act like a Moog. It can have the filter of other famous synthesizers. It's really got a lot of depth to it. And that's where you'll find the differences between software and hardware. Hardware is very often limited to the way it is, the way it was when you purchased it. Polyphony count, drum voices, all the different settings, whether it's MIDI capable or not. You'll find that software instruments are a lot more in depth. There's a lot more flexibility. You can do a lot more things. Got a lot more power. The only limitation is the power of your computer. And on this synthesizer, you'll see all the different knobs, cut-off filter, amp envelope, all the different settings. And in order to affect these knobs, you left-click, hold left-click down, and move your mouse to change the parameters, and that'll alter your sound. Now, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, I've got a camera on my Push 3. All Push 3 essentially is a controller device. There does actually come a standalone version as well that operates independently of a computer. But if we just think of it as a controller for now, that's what my version is. That can control this synthesizer. That can control all the settings. So you've got 8 knobs and encoders on the Push 3. You can map those to any of the knobs on this synthesizer and tweak just like you would do if you had a piece of hardware in front of you. If you remember, these are all the knobs. When Mike brought his setup on our last meeting, the second meeting, it's hands-on. You put your hands on, you tweak, and that's what you can kind of do with a Push 3. It's less, well, it's as fun, but less fun than Mike's setup, that's for sure. So I'm going to minimize this in a second, but before I do, I just want to discuss presets. When I've loaded Diva up, I'm going to press some keys on my controller. Now that's the default sound that loads with Diva. These pads on the Push 3 are just the same as pressing notes on a keyboard, pressing keys on a keyboard. The Push 3 is set out chromatically, and it's currently in something called, if I just scroll to the top, you'll see that I'm in scale mode. And what scale mode does, it stops you pressing a wrong note. So I've got scale mode enabled, F minor. So all that means is that if I press any of these notes on my Push 3, they're going up in the scale of F minor. So none of those, so you're essentially cutting out some of the keys that are not in that key, or some of the pads that are not in that key. I'll come to that in a second and explain it a bit better. But presets are, so the way all these knobs are set at the moment, the positions they're in determine the final output of this synthesizer. So if I go into presets, you've got loads and loads. I've actually added thousands to this, and I'll just load up something different. So selected keys on the door as a lead sound, and just listen to it. So it's quite different than the default sound. And if I go back into the main part of the synthesizer, the knobs are now all in different positions because it's a new preset. So that's all that presets means. It's all different presets. You can make your own presets and save them as well, by the way. But for now, I'm going to minimize Diva. So we're still on track 1, which is a MIDI track. We've loaded Diva, which is a MIDI synthesizer, and we've got some default audio effects, which are an EQ and a utility. And they're all in chain together, and they go in chain sequentially, and the sound will come out the other end. But let's get cracking. I'm going to create a MIDI clip. So MIDI clips, I'm just clicking in between to show you. I'm on track 1, which is MIDI track 1. We've loaded that default lead sound, and these are all different clips. If you think of these clips as opportunities to have different variations of a sequence, and what I mean by that is I'll double click on the first one, and that'll create a default MIDI clip of 1 bar, and you'll see as soon as I've double clicked and changed it, the visualization at the bottom has changed to a piano roll, and and it's a 1 bar clip, and it's set to 16 notes. And I know that by right clicking and seeing it's on 116. I can change that to 32s, but usually when I'm creating the type of music I do, 16 steps over 1 bar is a really good place to start. So I mentioned before I was in F minor, in the scale of F minor, and that applied to my controller so that I couldn't press a wrong note if I was practicing and trying to jam something out. But similarly on my keyboard, the piano roll on this side where my mouse is, you'll see that some notes on the keyboard are highlighted in purple, and that's just letting me know that they're the notes that belong to the F minor scale. And I'm only mentioning this because it's good, especially for beginners, if you want to learn about scales and staying in the right key and stuff like that, and being musically correct. But also it's a lot of fun not to be musically correct sometimes. I'm managing to magnify and make smaller the piano roll by left clicking, holding my left button down and going left and right, and it makes it bigger and smaller depending on what I want. And I'm just trying to find the root note for my scale, which is F. So there we've got F2, and what I'm going to do now is put some MIDI notes manually. I'm not using a controller or the keyboard to do this. I'm doing it with the mouse just to show you from a very basic level how you would do this if you didn't have a controller keyboard. So because the resolution's set to 16ths, if I create a note now on this grid at any point, it'll create a 16th note, and I'll do that by double clicking my left mouse button. And I'm just going to add some more. What I've done there now is created my first MIDI clip, a sequence, if you like, a 1 bar sequence, 16 steps over, and I've created 5 notes within that 16 step sequence. So let's listen here. That sounds. I launch the clip by pressing the playhead button on the clip. In fact, before I do that, I'll just show you the transport bar at the top. If I press play now, nothing will happen. And that is because my track isn't, the clip isn't armed, ready to play. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it now, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. But you should hear now, these notes play at this pitch over this length of time for this velocity. I've just threw velocity in there, but that's another parameter that I can immediately see. At the bottom, underneath the note, the piano roll, you'll see another area, and that's where you can send more MIDI information. And one of those that's set to at the moment is velocity, so I can make notes louder or quieter as well. But let's just play that clip for now. Now to stop it, I press the transport button at the top, and you'll see that the clip's still enabled, it's green, ready to go, which means if I now press the transport key at the top, transport play button at the top, it'll play that sequence. So hopefully you get the idea of that. I'm going to select all the notes now by left clicking and dragging around them all, and I'm just going to change the length of the notes, and you should hear a difference in that sound. And again, I'm going to change the velocity of the first two, and you should hear a slight difference between them. Now you can see I've actually reduced the velocity to near 0, but how much that effect takes place will depend on the key track velocity of the particular keyboard that's set to, or the velocity settings on the patch. So the Diva synth I've just loaded. Let's have a listen and hear. You can hear a slight difference, but it's not as pronounced as. Hopefully you get the idea that the velocity affects how loud it is in that moment in that clip. So I also shorten the notes there, and again all I've done is alter the MIDI information that we're sending that synthesizer. We're telling that synthesizer, play these notes, F2, at these points in time on the grid for this length of time at this velocity. All that is MIDI information. We could send that MIDI information to the software synthesizer we've just done. We could send it to an external drum machine or an external synthesizer, just like the ones that Mike brought with him at the last meeting on Tuesday. So hopefully that gives you a basic idea of what MIDI is. So I'm going to move on to audio now. I'm going to do that by clicking the audio track number 2. So I've clicked that, and it's brought up, similar to the last track, an EQ8 and a utility. And what I'll just do to demonstrate is I'll try and drag Diva onto an audio track. And straight away it's highlighted in red. Apologies, where the video, the push 3 is in the bottom left, is cutting out some of this, but I'll just read it out. It says only audio effects can be inserted into an audio track. So it's saying you can't drop that instrument here. I'm going to try and drop it on, and it won't do it. So if you're trying to drop MIDI devices and MIDI instruments into an audio track, just be aware it won't work. And that's the reason why. It's not a fault, it's not an error, it's deliberate. Audio tracks are just for audio files. So audio files are typically WAVs or AIF, or there are some other extensions I can't think of off the top of my head. But what I'll do to demonstrate this is go back to the main navigation pane and go through the library and look at samples. Now, where it is in the structure of this, the samples at the top, near the top, are the samples that Ableton have given you with your package of Ableton Live. So all these samples are samples that have come from within Ableton. So if I click one now, you'll see that it generates a preview of it at the bottom of the navigation window. So it generates a visualized WAV file, and it lets you hear it as well. It previews it for you. So you can, that's a drum loop over 4 bars. So I'm just going to take that off. The previews, just to let you hear the sound. It's not part of the sequence. It's not loaded into any of the tracks. It's simply just to let you hear what you're previewing. Let you audition it. You audition it by holding that button down there next to the file. So let's have a look. We'll load one. Right, there we go. It's a nice one-shot sound. Drag and drop that onto your first audio clip. And if you double-click that audio clip you've just created, you'll see at the bottom everything's changed. And again, it's showing you a visual representation of that WAV file. Now, it's a one-shot sound. It just ping and drops out. It's not a complex sequence or anything like that. But it's stretched over 4 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. And obviously the person who's created that, I think, has done it for a deliberate effect, because there's quite a big reverb tail on the end of the sound for an atmospheric vibe sort of thing. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the first clip, because if I press play on this one, that one will go as well, because it's triggered and ready to go. So here we go. You can see it's starting at the beginning and working all the way through the 4 bars. It's looped and it's coming back round again to trigger. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the first MIDI clip we created, and it'll play in sync. So there we have an audio clip and a MIDI clip playing together. And the way we've set our clips up in the tracks means that they'll play in time. You'll see in the audio file it's set to loop, which, as you've just seen there, quite obviously it's looping every time it gets to the end point. You can change that end point and you can mess around with all those settings. You'll also notice something called warp. I'm not going to go deep into this, but Ableton were probably the pioneers in terms of this technology. They've got something called warp, which will alter basically whatever sample you've got, it'll put it in time with your project. Now, the more exaggerated that is, the less reliable and the less pleasant it is to listen to. You'll get audio artifacts if your sample's 80 BPM and you've changed it to 200 BPM. But it's really useful, especially for drum beats and stuff like that. You can warp any sound to match the tempo of the track. I won't go too much more into it than saying that, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. I would say learning Ableton, just do it all in small bits. Nothing is too complicated, but I think the complication comes if you take too much information at once. So that for now covers the basics of Ableton, what it does, what a MIDI track is, what MIDI information is, and what an audio track is, and how they all synchronize together. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments, but thanks very much.